The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on FBT, the important bits you've missed. For our webinar today, we have muted all attendees. If you have a question, please use the chat box in the control panel displayed on your screen. Today's webinar will be recorded and you will receive a link to the recording afterwards. My name is Angela Lehman. I am the Legislation Manager here at ADP. We are joined today by Georgina Crow, who is the Channel Sales Manager from Concur, our partner. Welcome, Georgina.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It's always great to have you online, Georgina. We are going to start with what we are going to start today with what we are not covering. Today's presentation is not a standard FBT overview or training session. What you will get from today are the insights that both Georgina and I can part with you from our years of experience working in this area, and what we often see are some of the things that trip people up and where they become unstuck. This practical information, it's all practical and it's not FBT theory, so we will enforce it with a case study at the end. Our main focus will be on entertainment and expense payment benefits, as they tend to be the most common benefits provided, and yet the ones that businesses still account for incorrectly. So,
yeah, absolutely, Angela. Thanks for that lead-in. What we see also in addition to that in the market is that 90% of the businesses we speak to in the mid-market space use the 50-50 method and are overpaying on their FBT. So what we also wanted to cover today is how to minimise your FBT obligations and improve the management of reporting.
Great. Well, that said, our overview is discussing the common errors and omissions for FBT returns, the business side of FBT, so the non-FBT return type issues you need to consider. Don't forget your employees, so just a word about dealing with employees in respect of FBT. Some tips and tricks, again, as we said, from experiences that we've seen, and as I mentioned earlier, just tying it all in with a real-life example being Daryl's story. We'd like to mention that this presentation is just general guidance and not advice, so we recommend you obtain independent legal, financial or tax advice. So, with our common errors and omissions, Georgina, would you like to take us through the first few?
Sure, no dramas. So a common area of error is failing to include certain benefits as entertainment. So this usually arises because the benefit has been coded to an incorrect GL account. The person preparing the return is not made aware of the benefit or category of benefits, or the benefit is considered to be a business benefit without proper analysis being undertaken. So these are commonly seen as business lunches is what we see, whereby sort of a business lunch does constitute meal and entertainment for FBT purposes. So excluding the value of entertainment provided by associates under the actual method is also another area that we do see. So an associate of an employer is also constituted as an employer for FBT purposes. And any benefit that that associate provides to the employees of your organisations may actually still constitute a fringe benefit. So just something to be mindful of there. Another common omission is classifying sustenance, such as light meals, but classifying it more as meal entertainment and vice versa. So just be careful with the definitions you communicate to your employees with regards to sustenance versus meal entertainment. Also, we see recreational entertainment included as meal entertainment when using the 50-50 method. So it's important here to categorise between recreational entertainment and meal entertainment and evaluate them accordingly.
Thanks, Georgina. They're great points. I'll move over to GST. So funnily enough, when we're focusing on one indirect tax, we sometimes forget the other. So if you're using your GL accounts to try and ascertain some of the FBT amounts, make sure you gross up to GST, because those amounts will not be inclusive of GST in your GL. and this is a common mistake that's made incorrectly on the FBT return. The other thing I was going to mention is the effort for good record keeping can be rewarded, as you can stand to achieve FBT exemptions and concessions if you can have the right records to support it. You may qualify for minor benefits exemptions or premises exemptions for property and expense benefits. And travel via taxi could even be exempt if certain bands or entertainment can be shown and attributed to the records that you have maintained. So just ensuring that you have the records. Claiming the minor benefits or property exemption. So we know that a lot of people use the 50-50 method, one because they may not have the appropriate data, and two because they see it's just easiest. But the problem is you are not allowed to claim the minor benefits exemption or in-house property exemption when you're using the 50-50 method, and it's very often we've seen that mistake. Applying concessions and exemptions, you must collect the relevant declaration or standing declarations from employees, all the ones that are business-wide policy ones, and you must have them on file when you lodge the FBT return. Otherwise, you should not be claiming those concessions or exemptions. And the last one is we see people paying way more FBT than necessary just because they don't have the relevant data and have not worked on FBT and given it the necessary thought process. So we're now going to talk more about the business side of FBT, so the non-FBT return side. Georgina, did you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, sure. So just to kick off, I just wanted to provide some insight into the conversations we often have with clients, and that is that businesses can control company expenses and achieve real dollar savings if they can improve the way that they manage and calculate meals and entertainment fringe benefits tax. We do understand, however, that it can be challenging to find the best calculation. So while many organisations can confidently identify where FBT is applicable, they often struggle to identify which calculation method is best for their business, and as a result they pay more FBT than necessary. This is typically because they actually don't have the data, the time or the resources to use the actual method. Also, finance can't see or enforce or adjust policies to minimise that liability throughout the year. So what this means is they get to the end of the reporting year and you just sort of have to pay the bill.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess following on from that, my first point was it's more than just having work papers and calculations on file, and that's where I'm going to kick off now to say it's not just filing an FBT return. So the first thing I'll say to that is all company policies regarding meals, expenses and entertainment should be geared to support the FBT treatment in the tax return, i.e. a policy that says where we give mobile phones, they are only provided for business use, and that you have some kind of enforcement behind that policy. Collect and have on file all declarations to support calculations. So with the record keeping, as I mentioned earlier, one of the common areas is not having the substantiation for concessions, things like declarations to support your calculations. So if you have, for example, an employee who is living away from home, you should have all the relevant declarations from that employee on file and with you before you lodge the return. The other point I would like to make, and again it's more of a business process issue, is that if you have expense approval forms where employees must sign off to have, say, an event or a special meal approved, make sure that you include FBT as a line, because what we often see is that the cost centre gets a hit from an FBT amount that area wasn't expecting to see, and that extra cost generally raises questions, and it's generally quite negative, but if it's something that they consider at the time of planning their event, I think it saves everyone a bit of heartache. Don't forget employees. So this is something I mentioned in the overview. It seems to be an area where a lot of businesses don't maybe think about, and it's important because not only does it mean that employees will help you with the record aspect of it, but it also means that you have happier employees. So what we say is educate your employees. So as a good employer, you should educate employees about what reportable fringe benefit amounts are and how they impact them, perhaps in your induction process or in some kind of welcome documentation, so that they know about them early. The other thing is, if you do have employees with RFBAs, draft them early and give the employees an opportunity to review them. They can then confirm the benefits that you've assigned to them and ensure that they are correct. And that, obviously, the earlier the better, because you can ensure it's adjusted by the time you lodge your return. Okay, so the impact of the RFBAs, remember that even though it's not something they have to pay tax on, it's not income taxable, it is actually something that can impact their eligibility to government assistance or obligations, including child support, Medicare levy surcharge, and any help or financial supplement debts with the government. Georgina, any other points to add on that?
I just wanted to circle back to educating employees. I just wanted to note that employees generally want to do the right thing, but it can be difficult for them to remember all the information that they should be capturing, such as travelling versus non-travelling attendees, location, and as mentioned before, sustenance versus meal entertainment as an example, and then how that affects the FBT liability. So you can use clear descriptive definitions for expense types, but just be mindful that overcomplicating it will confuse employees and impact the quality of data from both a calculation and compliance perspective. So providing your employees with guidelines will help achieve this.
Excellent, thank you. So tips and tricks. I know it's really easy to say, but do not wait until the end of the FBT year to start collating the data. Where you can, have policies in place and processes in place that mean that you can collate that data all year round, and data can be collected as expenses are incurred if you have the optimal systems in place to facilitate this. Make sure that your policies and processes are in place all year round to support you in preparing the FBT return. Capture more data than less. It gives you a choice of calculation methods and an opportunity to reduce your tax liability in certain circumstances. The other note is a lot of people do remember to review their GL but not their payroll system, so please be sure that you review both, because of sometimes transactions such as salary sacrifices or living away from home allowances will be housed in the payroll system and not in the GL, so just be aware of that. The other thing, and I guess this is kind of the hidden entertainment classification for FBT, is where you have entertainment at an external venue and it's for your exclusive use, such as hire of a hall or a boat or something like that. Consider whether you can treat it as entertainment facility leasing expense. I'm not going to go into the definition of that today, but basically it has its own tax treatment. It means that you can use its own calculation method. So if you use meal entertainment 50-50, you can choose to do 50-50 or actual for EFLE, which is great, and it also isn't reportable. So it's just another thought, another consideration for you when you're preparing your returns. Okay, so we did say we'll try and bring some of these points into a practical example. We do have a prepared case study, but please remember that this really applies to any sized business and various types of employees across the board. I think it's a really sort of it's a real example and it's things that Georgina and I have seen in dealing with businesses. So meet Daryl. He's our sales manager at Fine Foods. He has 9 employees and they regularly meet with business clients and prospects over lunch. He has had a golf day, had a Food Growers Association gala dinner, and a food industry conference in Sri Lanka. So in reality, you know, Daryl had a great year. He and his team have achieved their sales targets, and Daryl has attended all these events either on behalf of or provided by Fine Foods. As you can see by his comments under each of those events, he sees this as being part and parcel of his role and does not necessarily consider any of this as entertainment to him personally. So Daryl does not think that FBT applies. Finance, however, believes that there are FBT implications, and the reality is it just isn't a priority for Daryl. So what do finance do, Georgina?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a conundrum I think most businesses can relate to, and really the sort of the two alternatives you kind of have are you can train and educate your employees on what constitutes FBT and train them on the policies and procedures in order to capture the right information up front. Or the business and finance can leverage technology to provide employees with tools to make their jobs easier and automatically capture this data up front.
Yeah,
maybe we'll have a look at what training and education looks like to start with.
Yeah. So what I'll do, I'll go into each of those events on the first slide in a little more detail. So our golf day at Royal Pines, Daryl gets a round of golf at the 18-hole course. He gets equipment hire. It's worth $200 per person to attend, and it's been given to him as a networking and lead generation opportunity. So let's have a look at finance's likely impact for FBT purposes. So the golf day would in fact be classified as recreational entertainment provided by way of an expense payment fringe benefit. This is because the round of golf is for Daryl's personal recreation or enjoyment, despite what he may think and despite the case that it was an industry event. Had Daryl purchased a ticket for the golf day himself, it would not have been tax deductible to him in his personal tax return, and therefore the otherwise deductible rule cannot apply. So that rule basically says if an employee can take a tax deduction for it personally, then the employer can also do the same with a declaration. So that's not going to be the case here for the golf day. However, as the ticket for the golf day was under $300 including GST, i.e. $200, Fine Foods would be able to apply the minor benefits exemption if they can substantiate that the benefits of similar nature were not provided on a regular or frequent basis, and if only, and again this is taken from an earlier slide, only if they are using the actual method. So you can't apply it if you're using any other method. So in this case, we don't know how many golf days Daryl may or may not have attended, but I'm assuming this is the only one. So if it's under $300 in value, minor benefit can apply. I will put a note in here to say the ATO actually has not specified what quantum it deems to be infrequent or irregular in respect to the provision of benefits. So if you are so inclined, there is an ATO ID 2012/98 that the tax office issued, and it advises on using the ordinary meaning as per the Macquarie Dictionary for infrequent and irregular. So not particularly helpful, but if you want to have some bedtime reading, by all means. So let's look at our food industry conference in Sri Lanka. So he's a lucky boy. He got to go to a 4-day conference in Sri Lanka. 3 days of the workshop were 3 days of it was workshop and lectures. On the last day, they had a visit to a working tea plantation, and they got to see a demonstration of harvesting and packaging procedures conducted at the plantation, which is all very relevant to the food industry. And then after that, they were treated to a half-day tour of Colombo and some sightseeing as arranged by the conference host, which is a third party. So, likely FBT implications for Fine Foods. Based on these facts, the initial 3 days of the seminar do not appear to attract FBT. In addition, the tour of the tea plantation also seems to be relatively relevant to his role and advancing the knowledge in food and food preparation for Daryl and Fine Foods. So if Fine Foods could ascertain the cost of the tour component from the seminar registration, they should be including that component as an expense payment fringe benefit. If they can't basically find the component of the tour, they would have to source a market value of the tour. As Georgina did mention in an earlier slide, even though the benefit was provided by a third party under what's known as the arranger provisions, the benefit provided to Daryl, or the employee in this circumstance, by a third party is still deemed to classify as being in respect of employment and would be the liability of Fine Foods as the employer. However, the half-day tour of Colombo is in recreational nature, which Daryl has personally enjoyed and has no nexus to his employment and is definitely FBT-able. My only note on conferences to everyone is make sure that you keep copies of the conference agendas where you've paid for, obviously, the conference and is something you need to review for FBT purposes, because every time you come to the end of the FBT year, it would be prudent to look through those agendas and see if there are some hidden FBT items in them, like this conference for Daryl, because on face value, when you look at the conference in total, it looks like it's all very business related, but when you take a good look at it, you can see that there is some FBT that applies. Okay, our very last event was the gala dinner that Daryl attended. It's a food growers gala, and it's an event in which Fine Foods contributed a $5,000 sponsorship for. In return, they had a banner and logo displayed at the event and their logo printed on all the tickets for the event. Additionally, 4 tickets were given to Fine Foods to have their representatives attend the event, and they were valued at $40 each. So potential FBT implications. So again, having also met the definition of an expense payment fringe benefit, it would appear the value of the ticket on face value to the gala would have been taxable for FBT purposes. But in this circumstance, which is a positive for Fine Foods, there is actually a guidance note that the ATO has issued that says in cases where the sponsorship arrangement is in place, attendance by executives to assess the effectiveness of their sponsorship investment will not attract FBT. Now, just be aware that you need to assess this on a case-by-case basis. You can't always assume that it will apply. The main factors to consider are, 1, the value of the sponsorship, 2, the value of the tickets or other benefits provided in return, and 3, the number and role of the employees attending. So if the tickets were the same or more value than the sponsorship, you could probably argue that there might be an issue, or if you're just sending any employees and not necessarily someone in a position to actually review the sponsorship investment, then again it may be argued that it's not quite applicable. I would say, based on the high-level information we have about this gala, it is unlikely that the gala event tickets would be deemed as fringe benefits. Fine Foods has a sponsorship arrangement in place with the Food Growers Association. The value of the sponsorship clearly outweighs the value of the tickets provided, and Daryl is a senior executive, and his role seems legitimate to be invited to the event. I guess what I'd like to say here, now that we've done our 3 events, is you can see it's quite complicated. There are so many exceptions and exemptions that may or may not apply. The more you know, the better. But of course, it means that you need to stay across FBT legislative changes. You need to have a lot of manual work around to ensure that you've maintained registered and review agendas, etc. So wherever possible, streamlining these processes is to your advantage. I think we should move to leveraging technology, Georgina.
Yeah, no drama. So thanks. While training is important in the business, I think if you have a simple, easy-to-use spend management tool up front to capture the data as you're spending, as it occurs, you can make timely business decisions and make it easy for employees to do the right thing and keep them focused on basically delivering revenue to the business in the case of a salesperson, rather than expecting them to become an expert on FBT. So automated tools can make FBT reporting easy for both the employee, who is obviously incurring costs on behalf of the business, and finance, who ultimately has to report on this liability. So by leveraging technology, companies can avoid costly data entry errors that is reliant on employees understanding, obviously, the correct accounting codes and other tax-related information to input, as Angela has just gone through with those 3 examples. It's all about, and it really comes down to the quality of data in as to the quality of data you're going to get out of your system. So leveraging technology makes it really easy for the employees to follow policy as well and capture the data that you need, which in turn, as I mentioned, lets them focus on the job at hand. So I suppose that we can ask the question then, so what type of tools can be used to capture this expense data upfront? Well, you want to be looking at things that are mobile or cloud-based solutions. So approvals can be done on the go, for example, and the type that can forward meeting invites into your expense management system to capture the attendee type or location, etc. Or can pull data from the phone contacts to avoid duplicate entries and the manual work that's involved in entering those in separately. Ideally, you also want to be able to read information off those manual receipts and automatically input that into your expense management system. And also making use of uploading employee or customer master lists is also another area of how you can capture that spend and meal entertainment information upfront, just to name a few. So what does all this mean if you're capturing the data upfront? Where does all the information end up? Well, ADP, as you've heard, partner with Concur, and the reason why we do that is we want to help organisations manage their FBT. So in what you're seeing here is an example of the FBT analytic report. And this provides some insight into what businesses want to track when it comes to their meal and entertainment spend. So here we can see Daryl's 9 employees. Finance can use this section to make sure the right people are going out and spending the company's money on the right activity to generate business. So, for example, you would expect to see those sales reps there, which is great. But if you saw a reception on this list and they were spending a significant amount of money, you might want to investigate why that is the case. Further, you can quickly see where the actual is high against the total amount, or you can actually look at 50-50 versus the actual method against each employee. But where the actual is high against the total amount, you might want to understand if it is optimal to have more employees than clients attending at one meeting, which then also speaks to us, I suppose, improving the productivity in the business and the sales engagement. You can also see meal spend by attendee type. So if there was a high number of spouse or family member, you can't see it on this chart, but some companies do categorise to that level. You may want to drill down further as to why we have such a high frequency of spouses or family members attending or incurring FBT. Some companies also want to track different expense types that incur FBT and to give a more holistic view outside of just meals. So these category codes might be domestic travel, international travel, business meal, conferences, functions, but it really does depend on the nature of the business and how the company spends its T&E. So here you can see the FBT dashboard provides you with actionable reporting, and I'll explain why. So here you can see liability trends in order to adjust policy where required. Perhaps in the lead up to the end of year when you know there will be an increase in spend on Christmas parties, spend decisions can also be made when looking at the previous year as well. So just by looking at those trends and the flow in of money in, money out during each month, you can adjust policies as they are occurring or to prepare for increased spend, like as I mentioned with the Christmas party. Also, you can see how each method is tracking against the budget. So in the dashboard, you can actually set up what your budget is for the year, and then you've got the cumulative FBT liability and how you're tracking against budget. And in the top left-hand corner, you can quickly see which reporting method will deliver the lowest liability. So this is pretty powerful. The ATO actually encourages companies to use the lowest liability calculation. So it may in fact be the 50-50 method. In this case, it is the actual method, and you can see there are over $5,000 in savings in this particular example. But at least now you have the data to make the optimal business decision.
Excellent. Thanks, Georgina. I guess to sum up what Georgina's been talking about, leveraging technology is, as you can see, does make managing your FBT liability much simpler. Everyone can focus on the job that they're employed to do. So Daryl and his sales team can focus on hitting their sales targets without having to be bogged down with too much compliance for FBT purposes. There's no undue burden on employees, and the only real education is to add in certain fields such as attendee, and then that's the extent that the sales team or whoever the relevant employees would actually need to know on FBT. It's not a full technical FBT training that you need to provide. And as you can also see demonstrated by Georgina, finance has accurate data in real time and full visibility. They can make management decisions not just based on what needs to go into an FBT return, but maybe on policies and procedures on who should be spending and when. So leveraging technology is just a major way to make life that little bit easier. I guess we're coming towards the end of the presentation, and I do suggest that if any attendees on the line have any questions, that they put some through on the chat screen if they would like, and we'll see how we go for time. But before we get to that, I wanted to do some key takeaways for the session. Hopefully it's been insightful in some shape, way or form to you all, something you could take away, even just one thing where that little magic light came on in your head. But first and foremost, beware of the common errors that can trip you up, and I guess we've given you quite a few examples to go away and think about. Robust reporting is key to success. So as Georgina said, you will have the choice of methodology to apply. You can use it for management reporting, policy and process decisions, making sure you have information on hand. Processes and policies are your friend. Don't forget them. They will support you, and they will be a good substantiation and backing for your returns. Educate your employees. Ensure that they are on board with you and understand why there is this requirement on them, as well as RFBAs, to make sure you're cooperatively working towards a better outcome for the business. Your employees do play a key role in capturing the expenses as they occur, as we've discussed, and if you have the right technology, FBT can be fast, simple and easy. So that concludes the presentation for today. I'm just checking to see if we have any questions on the line. Here we go. Georgina, can I throw one at you? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
We've got Karen. She's asking, what if the tax rate or gross up factor changes?
Okay. I'm assuming that this question relates to the algorithm that the dashboard is using in order to pull that calculation. So if that's the case, the way we have built the report is so that you can adjust those at the beginning of each FBT year. It's certainly not hard-coded, so that when you're running the report, you can determine the GL codes, attendees, you can update the minor benefit exemption, you can also input the tax rate and the gross up factor before you run the report.
Oh, excellent. Okay, and just to even things up, I'll take this query on. Simon says, what happens if our policies and documents do not cover off on FBT? Okay, well, Simon, the reason why I guess I'm so adamant about this is just working with so many clients on FBT returns and dealing with ATO audits. What I've found in experience is if you've made an error, whether it be in classification of benefit, the calculation itself, the application of an exemption or concession, the ATO tends to be a lot more lenient when they can see that you have done everything as an employer that you can to, one, educate your employees, to enforce policies about the use of certain benefits, and that you know, you were aware that this item or this benefit could potentially have FBT implications, but you've done everything you can to ensure that it's been used in the proper way. Why is that important? Well, if the ATO needs to apply penalties or interest because of an error in the return, they may be a little more lenient where you can demonstrate that you have done the right thing, that you've considered all benefits to the best of your ability. So I guess it's really important in that respect, so good question. I think we're pretty much running out of time to cover off on the remaining questions. But if we didn't answer your question during the webinar, we're more than happy to take any questions offline. We will be sure to provide responses to all queries that have been registered, and we'll send it all out with the recording of the webinar to those of you that are registered on Tuesday. Also, if you want to find out more how ADP and Concur can help you, please feel free to ring the sales representatives on the number on the screen, and they would be more than happy to help you. Thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we hope that it's been educational. Thanks, Georgina.
Thank you.